it was really an interesting journey. It's such a success story for myself to, take to my parents, take to my circle, and, tell them that, hey, this is where you should invest.
Let's say $500 every month blindly into an S&P 500. Yes or no?
Oh my goodness. The consultant in me or the strategist in me is finding it so hard to answer it in a one or a zero. And that discipline flows into my principle for sure, which is
Hmm.
to say that I am going to stick to my principle. That's the discipline that I want to bring in myself.
Welcome back to the Ready Set Do podcast, where we discuss remarkable stories by regular people. In this episode, my guest is Raghav Taparia. Raghav is a financial investment aficionado who has successfully built out robust systems for making strides towards his own financial goal. During this episode, he shares a wealth of knowledge, starting with a brief investment for dummies section, investing principles, paycheck allocation methods, and most importantly, how anyone can get started on their own personalized investment journey. To steadily progress towards your own financial goals, Raghav shares with us the tools and strategies that enabled him to accumulate impressive dividends on a little known stock at the time using only his skills, research, and the resources that he will also share with us. This discussion is for anyone who is interested in the captivating world of personal finance and wants to learn practical strategies to lead the life that they want without compromising their future goals and ensuring long term success. As always, all sections are timestamped both on YouTube and Spotify and wherever else you get your podcast. In keeping with the theme of learning from somebody that's just two steps ahead instead of an expert, I'd like to emphasize more than ever that this discussion centers on Raghav's journey through learning the systems and strategies that he used to successfully build out his own brand of personal finance. This discussion centers on Raghav's journey through learning and implementing personal finance strategies and systems. I do not intend for this to be financial advice. Rather, my goal is to ensure that you can get to a point where you can begin to appreciate the landscape around investing itself and an accessible starting point to start building towards your goals. So, now, without further ado, my conversation with Raghav. Raghav, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, man. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And let's kick this off by going over what about investing interests you so much? How did it become such a passion project of yours, and that something that makes you devote so much of your time to it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons that drive me there. I think the first one's, of course, everyone of us who's in the industry working and, trying to earn a living essentially has a capitalistic mindset. And I'm looking forward to capitalizing on that, which is to be able to create great wealth for myself. But the other side of this is just not wanting to be a part of this, you know, how do I put it?
The
My life,
Matrix, could one say?
yeah, there we go. That's a great word, the matrix. I would like to not be a part of this matrix for the rest of my life. So I'm looking for an exit, and that's where all of this, comes into the play of me finding this as an exit.
That makes sense. Let's jump into some commonly occurring terms that we'll be going over in our discussion. So, can you walk us through a real quick, investing 101 type of a deal here, like ETFs, stocks, what all goes in that world, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. I think within this, under this umbrella, there's essentially two sides of things. One is finding companies that you would want to invest in for a certain duration of time so that you can see that company grow and benefit out of that growth as well. That's essentially what investing would be. And there's trading, which is to utilize a lot of technical and mathematical knowledge to find a stock that you think will have a certain direction of movement and invest in it or like buy it to sell, and you would know when you're going to sell
Mhm.
within investing. And that's essentially where I like to play. is stocks. So, which is a share of a company that you're trying to buy. There's also and a great area that for a common man to explore is ETF, which is
Mhm.
exchange traded funds. Those are a mix, or like consider that as someone else managing a big portfolio for you and you buying it on an exchange like New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, and uh, getting a part of or a piece of that pie. There's
Mhm.
a few other terms that help you understand valuations, and valuation becomes important for you to understand whether you're overpaying for a stock or a company or a share of company, or you're paying a fair value or a discounted value. And what you essentially mean by that is that, hey, I want to buy this apartment, and this apartment is going to give me so and so rent every month, and over a period of a year I will have this kind of cash flow which will essentially be my returns. How do I value these returns? And that's what valuation metrics will tell you. So within a stock there's a lot of valuation metrics that people utilize. There's price to earnings ratio, tells you what kind of multiples of value are you ready to give to the earnings of the company. Price to book ratio, to essentially help you understand what the balance sheet of a company looks like. And balance sheet would essentially also have the elements that tell you what kind of assets does a company own and what kind of liabilities, essentially loans
Mhm.
and payables, that a company needs to service. There's a bunch of other things that I guess we could explore through our conversation, but this is
Absolutely.
essentially what the landscape looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a great jumping off point for some of the things that we'll be getting into. But yeah, I agree that to start off, I think that's really helpful context around some of the topics that we are going to cover, in just a second here. So with that, I know for most people, there seems to be, generally at least, two distinct junctures in their lives. So the first of that is when you're a student and you're making limited amount of money, or just, no money at all, because you're just really focused on, schoolwork or academics, and just trying to get to a point where you can work full time and start making, building capital essentially. So for you personally, what are some ways in which your spending or investing habits changed when you were a student compared to now when you have a salaried position?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first time I made an investment, it was right out of my first internship or first paycheck that I had ever received, and that actually looked like a paycheck. It was from a particular bank signed by my employer. It had 12,000 rupees or $150 amount written in it, and I was really excited to figure out what I'm going to do with it. Uh, what I did was I had four members within my family who I wanted to get something for. So I used 4,000 rupees for it. And I had 8,000 rupees remaining, which is about $100 in today's value. And I ended up investing that in a company called DMart, which is what every Indian household, you know, grocery shopping place would seem like. And I remember buying DMart at 800 rupees. Right now it's at 4,500 rupees or so a share, and that was my first five bagger stock. So I think what I'm trying to say is things have not changed much since I've been a student, or for that matter, an employee at a company. I think the scale of investment has changed, which is that me using a certain amount of money to put into the market. And all of that just, is driven by um, the principles that I have that I want to employ when I'm thinking about personal finance and investing. What I do realize that is that it's a little bit tough to achieve the kind of discipline that I would want um, in investing when I'm a student versus when I'm an employee. When I'm a student, I'm trying to take care of a lot of expenses with a very limited budget, plus also enjoy my student life and find out ways in which I could build out a community. A lot of that involves you ending up spending money and reallocating your budget a certain way. But I think it was important for me during that time to keep in mind that there's also a broader goal that I'm trying to achieve. So I kept on finding pockets of time and coins in my pockets to go ahead and buy stocks, to be invested in the market, to keep a tab on what's going on. And I think that journey has stayed the same. What I've started doing now is being super disciplined, just as my company is in terms of giving me a paycheck. I am in terms of putting my money into the market. So I think that's how the journey is evolved.
I think that's really helpful in that it almost sounds like for most people, you're saying that it helps to have that long-term plan in mind that you can kind of pivot to at least a version of that long-term plan, still irrespective of where you stand currently. It sounds like it's all about knowing in the back of your mind what really your goal is, and then doing whatever you can really at a given moment of time to walk that path and not stray too far away from that goal that you set aside for yourself. Would you say that that's an accurate assessment, give or
Yeah,
take?
that's very well put across. And I'd like to take that a little further and say that there's not just investing that should be in the back of your head, like you said, the broader goal. Let's keep a focus on that as well. At least that's what the sort of um, discipline that I wanted to achieve. But also thinking about personal finance as a whole. I think there's not just elements of conscious thinking about what your money is doing and where it's being spent and where it's being invested, but also just making sure that there's a healthy relationship with you and money. So
Hmm.
if I went ahead at Purdue and spent $50 on a meal, I was conscious about it and made sure that I
Mhm.
recouped that money in a certain way. Or I um, found out ways to make sure that there's earnings that I have deployed further.
Interesting. So on that same note, contrasting that to right now where you just, so to speak, have a little bit more to play with, what does that look like for you personally? What do you do with your paycheck once it comes in?
I think I work very well with systems and methods, or like a structure to
Mhm.
my approach with a lot of like professional slash semi-professional things that I do, and investing is one of those, or like at least deploying and utilizing my money is one of those. And what I end up doing is allocating. I get two paychecks a month, and that's the story for a lot of employees here in the US, but you could
Mhm.
even, think about it from perspective of somebody getting one paycheck a month. I
Mhm.
know what section of it will go into the things that I need to maintain my living expenses, and also think about a few leisure expenses that I want to make, and that money is kept aside for those things. There's also another paycheck that would go into servicing my student loan, a portion of it. And then
Mhm.
there's a bunch of ways in which I've set up my money coming in so that it's allocated to investments automatically. For
Mhm.
example, my employer provides me with an employee stock purchase plan where they give me a 15% discount on about 15% of my paycheck that I would go ahead and invest in my employer's stock. And
Mhm.
um, what I consider that as is 15% gains over my investment because I get that
Mhm.
15% discount. Plus, um, that chunk of money already allocated to an investment account that I will consider as never accessible for me for any other needs. And then there's a little bit of portion of one paycheck after the two that's left that's not being serviced for anything else. And I use that to either send it to India and invest there or invest in the US, depending on what opportunities I find. Um, I think maybe I didn't touch upon the part where how I enjoy life with the rest of the money, or like with all of the
I was just
monies.
going to say, yeah, how do you exist?
Yeah, yeah,
Like in terms of your just ad hoc expenses, if we were to just put that under that broad umbrella.
yeah, yeah. That's the right umbrella to put that in. So, I think with the level of earnings that I have, there's still a little bit of money remaining from after all these allocations. Plus, I am super mindful of how I'm spending money, what instruments I'm utilizing to spend money, and making sure that in some sense I'm trying to be in a better financial situation, even if I spend money using those instruments. Couple of examples of those are, if I go out to eat, I make sure that I'm using the right credit card so that I can earn the right amount of points. Those points then would fund my future travel plans. And um,
Mhm.
if I want to buy something online, I'm trying to access a lot of other ways in which I could get the best deals out of that, or finding sources of influx that could support those expenditures. This situation keeps evolving from time to time. If I'm feeling rich, and if I'm feeling like I have done the less spending exercise for a few months, and now I've accumulated some disposable income, or like there's some disposable part of my money, I go ahead and um, find ways to spend that. I don't stop myself from spending money when I'm in such situations. I think, yeah, I think that's how I approach the system of getting money and spending, or investing money.
Couple call outs there. I think I really liked how you said you're almost reliant on the systems you have in place. I've been reading. I actually just not hopefully not that strong of a tangent here, but I've been reading Atomic Habits finally, and in that James Clear, I believe, says we don't rise to the level of our dreams; we fall to the level of our systems. So I probably butchered that quote, but it's something along those lines, and I think that what you just said resonates pretty well along with, you know, the systems you have in place for yourself to kind of not go off the rails and just derail your the plan that you have in place and the goal that you have in place for yourself. So on that note, Raghav, how do you understand where to invest your money, or how do you decide that aspect of it?
I think I've just been lucky with finding ways in which I can invest money, and I've also had a lot of help in being able to identify those sources or avenues. But I think what made me think about investing as the most appropriate manner, and investing in companies or investing in businesses as the most appropriate manner to build wealth, has come from this experience of mine where I was in a meeting, and I was an observer to an analyst, or someone at my level, really early in their career relative to somebody that they're speaking to in this meeting, who's a managing vice president and making
Hmm.
decisions of large scale that would impact, the business at a very high relative percentage level. And this analyst went ahead and made their presentations, messaging, or narrative slightly different from what my managing vice president wanted that to sound like. And the feedback that she gave my analyst was, or like her analyst was, that how can you think about increasing shareholder value? What can you do in your and change in your narrative, that when a shareholder who's going to get a hold of this presentation reads and feels confident that they've employed the right people to be able to increase their value? Which essentially means that how can somebody investing in that company get the returns that they want to achieve with this company? This managing vice president is a BCG veteran, which is Boston Consulting Group, one of the top consulting places, has an MBA, has a stellar career, and a fantastic personality, an employee, an exact kind of employee that you'd want. And to think about it, I am the shareholder of that company. I have invested in that company, and I've got such people working so hard and imbibing this narrative in every step of their work, just gives me so much confidence that I just need to do what I need to do is find such companies, find such people working for those companies, and invest in those companies. And that's just one element of it, but it's a very big element of it. I think this element has been highlighted by a lot of really smart people that I work with to identify investments. That you need to find the right management within a company to be able to get the confidence to invest in. So that's the sort of whole psychological angle that played to me and spoke to me and got me into investing, and that's essentially what I try to find. But there's a lot of other things that come into play that then later I try to work on to be able to find what I can look for within a company and invest. I think it'll be interesting to speak a little bit about my process, but I just want to make sure that that sort of gives you an idea about what I think investing should be like and why I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be my next question. So I'm very glad you brought that up. I just want to add that this may just feel something that's, probably fairly deeply ingrained in you already, because it sounds like you spend a lot of time thinking about and, kind of existing in that space. But personally, that was the first time I was exposed to, that idea where you have these many people at such a large scale working every day using those really smart brains of theirs to increase that shareholder value that you can simply just leverage for your own benefit. Granted, it's a really small piece of the pie, but again, if it were that easy, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation to begin with.
Right.
But as far as promises go, or as far as having your cake and eating it too goes, I do think it's a pretty foolproof plan to identify those organizations like that and really just invest whatever you can. Again, these are small amounts, but obviously, as we will get into, the compounding effect is, it definitely leaves ripples in its wake, as we shall see. But yeah, absolutely. My next question was going to be, yeah, how does a layperson such as myself go about trying to identifying which of these, are the most bang for my buck, so to speak?
Yeah, and let's clarify here that I'm going to include myself in that umbrella as well of somebody who's just learning along the way. I want to say that a lot of the success that I've had within this space has um, come through other people, come through my conversations from people who are I believe a lot smarter than me and a lot more insightful than me, and I've just been lucky to be in that company. And what I've tried to do is bring myself up to their levels as well through self learning, and it's still a very long journey and I'm still learning. So what I like but I found but I think the couple of things that were super necessary for me to be able to get to the stage that I am with the level of confidence that I have in investing is to, one, find out why I need to invest, which we've spoken a little bit about, and I've told you that I want to build wealth so that I can get out of the job
Right.
space and think about something that I really passionately want to do that's impactful for me. So it was really stage one or zero of starting this journey, which is to go back to the books. What? So I went to a couple of people who I knew were super successful within the space and asked them, what is this one book that I start reading so that I can understand what investing really means? And they told me that you need to read One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch. And I heard this from a few people, so I started reading it. And it was an absolute banger of a book. It gave me
Love
such
it.
good tools to
Mhm.
understand and identify companies and then later be able to research them in depth as well. And I recommend that highly to anybody who wants to
Wow.
start this journey. The other book that is on very similar lines and speaks to me about the kind of principles that I want to invest with, it speaks on the same lines, if not exactly that. Is Dhando Investor by Monish Pabrai. That book will tell you what it means to invest in a very good manner, but also by the end of it, tell you of a bunch of tools that you can start accessing to find the next opportunity that you want to invest in. So I think what I would love for anybody who would like to be on this journey, including me, is to go back to these books and start building out your principle. And I think these books are going to give you a great starting point to move forward. But what's this principle? It's all so jargony right now when I say this, and it's
Yeah,
also to some
yeah, I was
extent,
just going to get at, yeah. Can you help, I guess,
yeah,
decode this a little bit for us? Yeah, what are principles around investing, and I suppose more particularly, what is your,
yeah,
approach to that principle? And I think you mentioned the word discipline earlier, and I get a feeling that this has something to do with that discipline that you referenced. So yeah,
yeah.
very curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think in some sense it's attached with the element of what my goals are and how I approach it, which is where the discipline angle comes into the picture, and that discipline flows into my principle for sure, which is
Hmm.
to say that I am going to stick to my principle. That's the discipline that I want to bring in myself. But when it
Hmm.
comes to just investing principle, it's essentially what kind of companies do you want to invest in. There are various categories of investments that you can achieve. There's companies who are undervalued. They are not the best most growing businesses, but their underlying assets are really undervalued, and that is where you get tons of discount on those companies. There's businesses who are on a tremendous growth path. They're slightly overvalued, but you know that 10 years down the line you're going to achieve the returns that you want to, regardless of their valuation. My
Hmm.
principle is that for your viewers who are Indian and know North India a little bit, I'm a Marwadi, I'm a Banya, hate overpaying for stuff. I love discounts. And in my investing world, I love undervalued companies. It speaks to me that there's something that I'm finding in that company that other people are not able to see, which is why they've priced it so less. And that makes me feel a little smart, that makes me feel a little accomplished. So I love identifying these companies that are undervalued, and I go ahead and invest in those. And that's the principle that I follow. I end up trying to find errors or inefficiencies in the market, and that, of course, not my principle. I've learned this from the most smartest people in the world. One of them is Warren Buffett, of course, and one of them is Monish Pabrai as well. These two people have a very similar investing style. For that matter, they run their funds also very similarly, and I went ahead and
Hmm.
copied that principle for myself, and I'm being super disciplined in trying to stick to it. My father, who is a very long time investor as well, of the stock market and investor in equities, he ends up buying a lot of expensive companies, and those give me good returns. I'm not going to lie, I have seen companies who've doubled in price or in value, market value, and then I've entered and that market value has doubled again. And I get surprised by what my dad sees in a company's performance or
Hmm.
its stock price momentum, but I hate being a part of that story. And I've given my family and my peers ideas that are super undervalued. They're super skeptical about those because they've not heard of the companies ever. But I've done my fair bit of research, and I go ahead and tell them that, hey, this is an undervalued company, let's go ahead and buy it. And that's where I thrive the most. So that's my principle. And what I think everybody will be able to achieve when they're starting from stage zero of this journey, in the way that I think is the right way, is to learn, go back to the books, go back to the drawing board, is to be able to build that principle first. That this is the kind of companies that I love investing in, and I am able to identify those correctly. And then I'm gonna go ahead and stick to these, not get distracted by all the knowledge that the market is throwing at me, telling me that, hey, this is a great company or that is a great company. As long as I'm sticking to my principles, I have that discipline to be able to achieve good returns is what I feel.
That's so interesting to me. It almost sounds like there's an element of personal preference, almost like your own personal flavor that's involved to the type of investment that you go about making. Like you said, you and your father have very different or contrasting principles, it sounds like. And I think I'm understanding that where the discipline part of it comes in is that it's very easy to probably get swayed by, hey, that person did so well doing that, so maybe I should pivot to doing that instead. But it sounds like what you're saying is over the long term, it's really just building that system and the know-how really in place for one to really just back oneself at the end of the day and be like, that's fine. I'm just going to stick to what I have aligned for myself, and would you
Yeah.
say that's an
Yeah.
accurate way to look at it?
That's the perfect summary of what I was trying to say. I know that I used 6,000 words to say it, but I think that's essentially what I was trying to say.
So you reference these resources, these couple books that sound like would be a wonderful place for anybody to start, getting or identifying these high value companies, or well, maybe low value actually, because that's why we're trying to find them, and that's what we're researching, so to speak. So can you help us contextualize what that looks like in practice? So can you give us an example, maybe something from your portfolio, or yeah, really just an example where you identified where you used a certain tool or a learning from any of these books to then apply that personally in your investment journey, and hopefully make a decent amount of profit from it, ideally.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it'll be a great way to just, let your viewers, and for that matter, everybody who's looking into getting this journey, understand what that process looks like, where to take those learnings. And I think I want to take this back to one of the masters of value investing itself, and the first book that I ever read, which is One Up on Wall Street. That book is structured in such an
Mhm.
incredible way where Peter Lynch elaborates what are the various metrics to look at to be able to judge a company. And this is all quantitative
Mhm.
research, and super easy to replicate into what people who want to identify stocks call a stock screener. That screener
Mhm.
helps you toggle between various ranges that a particular metric could fall into, and you could design your own screen, which is a filtering system to find out a list of companies that you would then get that would suffice your conditions. Peter Lynch tells you what those conditions should be. He
Okay.
also then takes you to the qualitative aspect of finding out a company. So what I did was I applied that screener, got a list of 14, 15 companies, went through all of the various industries that those companies fall into, found out what I can understand well. And that's where the qualitative aspect comes into picture. He says that things should be easy for you to understand, and should be something that you have an edge over a lot of other people on, which is to say that you understand that industry deeply. Now, the company that I identified didn't understand very
Hmm.
well the industry, but I went back to the drawing board, and identified ways in which I could. One of that was going to my friend who's in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry that this company belonged to, and speak to him a lot about what the dynamics of that industry would look like, find out what the industry thinks of the pharmaceutical industry at that point to identify the entry positions. And that is one aspect of qualitative research. The other one was I went to all of the materials that the company had released that spoke about their business performance, started reading those. Being a business analyst helped there because I was able to understand what they were trying to achieve with their business in terms of growth, in
Mhm.
terms of profits. The company serviced the most sort of overlooked segment of customers who needed medicines, and everybody needs medicines. Everybody wants to spend on medicines, and that's what they did. They went to Southern America, they went to Africa, they
Mhm.
went to the bottom of the pyramid, the large customer base where they sold in volumes the kind of drugs that are easy to manufacture and be super operationally efficient. And that came through my qualitative research of the company. I also understood what their ambitions were. I looked at what the price of their share, which essentially speaks about their company's valuations, was. And
Mhm.
I think that sat very well with what I learned from Peter Lynch's book, which is that a lot of such companies are overlooked by analysts, overlooked by media coverage, overlooked by the Wall Street or the Dalal Street in India. That you end up getting those in the most attractive of valuations, and that's what happened to me. I bought it at around 580 and 630 rupees a share. That ended up going to about 15 to 1600 rupees a share. For that matter, I made my mom buy
Wow.
it too. It was one of her only multi-baggers. It was a three-bagger for her. And it was really an interesting journey. It's such a success story for myself to, take to my parents, take to my circle, and, tell them that, hey, this is where you should invest, and I'm going to find another company just like that for you. And I kept doing that over and over again. I think loved just taking all of that I learned from the book and applying it, and being successful in it.
That just sounds incredible. Yeah, I can tell from the way you're talking about it now how deeply impactful it must have been for you.
Yeah,
Couple questions on that, Raghav. The first being, so this screen that you mentioned, is that just an online tool? Is that just kind of like a website? And is there
yeah.
one that you recommend?
No, I will not recommend any of the tools. It's so important to find your own because you become super
Okay.
sort of comfortable with the one that you've started to utilize
I
and
see.
organically, looked into. What I used was screener.in, which has a repository of Indian companies.
Hmm.
Um, Found it really easy to code, almost like SQL scripts, which is what I utilize in my. It's a technical language that I utilize in my work all the time.
Okay.
So it was just fairly easy to understand and get a lot of information about the company in there.
So just to
But
be
there are a
clear, if
bunch
there's
of
a person,
online. Mhm. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, sorry, yeah. So if there's a person that isn't from tech and that doesn't understand, can they still use this, or is there like a
100%.
need for? Okay.
Yeah. In this day and age, honestly, you can find tons of material to make yourself
Hmm.
comfortable with any kind of tool. Yeah, if you search stock screener, um, and you get a
Right.
list of bunch of tools that you can try your hands with and find out what sits well with you.
Makes sense. My second question was, so all of this research that you referenced, rough ballpark, how much time did that take you? Because I think I was thinking about this and I just have no idea. It just feels like such a broad range. So I'm curious to hear what the time investment was like, because it does sound like the value investment was certainly worth your while. So, just to kind of contextualize that, yeah, how much time effort was that in terms of
Yeah,
hours, let's say?
it'd be tough to give that in terms of hours because there's a lot of like variation in terms of how often I could uh, work on this at a given
Hmm.
section of my month or couple of months. But I think I tried to bake the story over a period of 3 months and track the
Okay.
company's valuation, which is essentially share price movement over that time as well, to find the right entry point or right valuation that I think is discounted enough to give me the margin of safety that I need. That's another term, by the way, in Stock 101 or Investing 101 that's important for everybody to go and Google. Super easy to understand. But that over a 3 months of time essentially just got myself to the most amount of information that I can capture and be the most confident in that investment. But that's not a thumb rule at all.
Hmm.
I have taken 6 months of
Right.
research for a certain company and stock price tracking, valuation tracking, to find myself to be in a comfortable spot. I, in my exercise of investing, do a lot of presentations to a lot of people who are in this space with me coming along the ride, to make them critique my ideas so that I can identify areas where I need to capture more information. Some companies require me to research a little more, some companies a lot lesser. A lot of my ideas also come from there. So it's a other way street as
Hmm.
well, where I then don't have to do the amount of research that I have to do for my own ideas. I have to just validate what they're saying and find out ways in which I can critique them, and then them doing the rest of the research. So it's sort of a combination play here that defines how much time you're going to take to identify companies. But investing for me is so important that I don't really judge the ROI on my time investment in terms of time value of money at all. Uh, the This also would bring me to this place where I want to highlight it so like stress upon it, is that you need a partner when you think about investing, to build that confidence, to find that partner, to be able to critique.
Somebody,
There's tons of ideas that you can get from various different sources and people with different principles. So I'm always looking out for partners that I can share my ideas with and have them share their ideas with me as well.
I yeah, I love that. And Again, really appreciate the collaboration that you're always open to. On that note, from there, I think where my mind is going next is that how does all of this look like in practice? So, I guess my question is what are some, I don't really like the word, but hacks or tools that general people can use in their daily lives as a part of their probably starting out their journey, but even people that have been investing for a while, what are some really accessible tools that could be used by everyday people to begin or continue their journey towards personal finance and smart personal finance, really?
I think what I would
Yep.
love to speak to is a little more philosophical than exact, but I'll definitely get to exact because I know that feels exciting as well. And I would love for people to get to a position where they can think that they're starting off and doing the right thing.
That tracks
And
with me. I think that makes perfect sense. Yep.
yeah, and philosophically, I think there are two things that, two or three things that, got me to think about personal finance really strongly. One of them is, of course, investing that we spoke deeply about. The other one is
Mhm.
your expenses that are unavoidable. Your rent is
Right.
unavoidable.
Fixed
Your
costs.
food,
Yep.
exactly. Food, rent. You would love to travel. If you do love to travel, just like me, travel is unavoidable, honestly. No, in all seriousness, though, travel is something that comes into the ledger bucket. There's expenditures on various shopping sprees that
Mhm.
you go out on and stuff like that that comes into the ledger bucket for me. But there's ways in which I could find the right amount to spend on and the right deals that so that I can feel one a little accomplished about how I'm being conscious about my personal finance and how I'm being mindful of the money that I'm spending as well, so that I achieve the most optimum inflow and outflow of money. Hacks, there are of course credit cards that I'm super involved with. I pay my rent using the right credit card, so that I earn points on it, which essentially I try to convert in my head as discounts or value that can fund my future ledger expenses. There's like I said, marketing from these consumer loving companies, right? I try to utilize those. I have some liquid funds that I can deploy in certain banks who would give me a little bit of promotional money for my fun leisure activities. I try to utilize those. I try to go out and find deals on gift cards, which people try to sell online on discounts, so that I can use those to buy groceries for myself. So there's a lot of various things that I do within these buckets of
Mhm.
expenses that help me find that satisfaction to think to get things on a discount or on a value that's attractive to me.
So, is a good way to think about this that necessarily there is no end to the amount of hacking or using these offers or discounts or the right credit card for a certain activity that one can get to? Would you say that it really just boils down to one's appetite of how scrappy do you want to get here? Like, if you want to buy, say, a TV on Amazon, how many people are you willing to reach out to, and bug before you end up pulling the trigger? Is that a decent way to look at this?
That's a great way to look at this, and that's what I essentially do, which is to find the right amount that makes it worth my while to find
Hmm.
the value to decrease for something that I'm trying to buy, or like monetary value to decrease but my value to increase. I think in the back of my head, in a very rudimentary manner, what I try to do is assess what value is my time worth and how much value am I attaining to be able to put into that time, and then put into that activity, and then extrapolate it over a period of time. For example, I'm learning about utilizing certain points a certain way through a credit card that at this moment might only give me $50 worth of value, and it would take a bunch of time for me to figure it out. But if I'm able to convert that into a process of hacks for the future, I think that's worth my while, and that's a good system for me to add to my portfolio of personal finance. I think I'd approach it that way.
Makes sense. I think that's a super helpful rule of thumb. So on that topic though, on the the credit card gaming, really, that whole you hear a lot of stuff online, and I suspect a lot of it is just kind of made up fluff, if I'm being very honest. So I think I'd be really curious to really just kind of get a gaming 101, and by gaming here I'm referring to credit card gaming 101, and like
Right.
where exactly does one draw the boundary, and what's a decent safe quote unquote way to go about doing that, because I have heard that there are a lot of gains that people leave on the table a lot of times, just because of the the misinformation around, or yeah, really just lack of awareness, honestly, a lot of time. So I think I
Yeah.
would really benefit from that, 101 around that.
Yeah, okay, so gaming 101 would also involve me defining what gaming is, which is essentially churning out of various products that give you a huge amount of value on at the face of it, or like right off the bat, but then over a period of time you've only entered or bought that product because you wanted that value and not to utilize what services that product gives you. In an example of a credit card, you would sign up for a credit card because they give you a lot of sign on bonuses for your initial spend, but you don't mean to utilize that credit card often because you know that doesn't fall in an optimized manner in your portfolio, and you keep doing this with multiple credit cards, and that's essentially what gaming a credit card would be like. uh,
Okay.
I think the online word, and this is my sort of perspective from what I've heard across various portfolios, is split in the middle in terms of liking or disliking gaming. uh, I personally think that we're part of a world where you know taking value out of certain things involves you to be able to define that value in dollars, right? And that's where my perspective comes into the picture of just being okay with finding the right deals that can help me put myself into a great optimized personal financial situation. And that's how I approach gaming. So there are credit cards that I don't use, there are credit cards that I use. What gaming would do for me is get me a lot of value out of each of those credit cards, but I try to control myself or optimize my level of signing on to these products is by being aware of what that would do to my credit score or to my level of application or capacity to access
Mhm.
this tool in the future. For example, I want a particular credit card, and that's going to be the most optimized for my portfolio that I'm going to want to have a long term relationship with. But this credit card is hard to get and requires me to sort of be better with the signups and better with my portfolio, less entries of new products.
Mhm.
So I would stop myself and say that, hey, this card adds more value to my portfolio. So I would want to wait. I would not want to sign up to more products and get that credit card. I think that's sort of the 101 for me, is to be mindful of
Uh-huh.
what you're signing up to, but also understand that there's a lot of value that you could achieve if you ended up signing up for a lot of bonuses or signed up for a lot of products that these companies want you to take up. I think I try to detach myself from the idea that, hey, this may not be right just because you don't want to use the product. It's okay for me to still sign up. I'm still there's tons of valuation models built behind these products and behind the way in which they give
Yep.
you these discounts, and these companies do make sure that they account for the gains that you're trying to achieve out of it and try to earn all the money that they still need to from you. So there's still this element of give and take between you and the company. And I think what you're getting out of it is great as long as you're not stretching yourself.
Yeah, and I guess a version of that discourse that's also that I have seen, and again, bear in mind that I'm not even really from this whole sphere, is that a lot of people say that what you get up front from that sign-on bonus actually gets taken out of you as the years go by, and once you have to start paying, annual fees and such, which I know not every credit card has. And again, I don't mean to go down this rabbit hole, But I'm just curious to hear your take on that whole discourse. So is the right thing to do to just then cancel or like stop using the card after that promotional period is over, or do you just keep that in the back burner? And so yeah, like I guess, yeah, how do you go about when situations like that come up?
Yeah, I think when it comes to personal finance and anything associated with your journey of building wealth, I would love for me to not ever keep anything on the back burner. I would love for me to be super aware, super conscious of what's happening with my portfolio of various products and investments that I'm a part of. To answer your question though, yeah, that's the approach that I take. Is if I'm not using a card, I'm going to
Hmm.
and if there's a membership fee associated with it, I try to find ways to downgrade the card or uh, take
Yeah.
that take cancel that account. Consider that there's going to be repercussions for both in terms of your credit score.
Hmm.
For in my experience, for my credit score, those have been short-lived to really impact my process of approaching personal finance. But you would want to be super aware of what's
I
happening,
see.
what that's doing to your personal system. I think there's tons of resources online. I would love
Mhm.
for everybody to access those resources before there are decisions made. But I think that's the approach that I take: is go ahead and cancel the card. I also tell myself that if I'm spending $4,000 that a card wants me to spend in a certain period of time before they give me the sign on bonus, I think the card's earning that money through the spend that they need to be able to justify the sign on bonus. So that's the give and take that I was speaking about, which essentially just puts me in the right spot to
Hmm.
be able to access that sign on bonus. The element that you're talking about, which is that the company ends up getting what they need in the long term, has a lot of elements that a simple consumer wouldn't understand. I work at a bank
Hmm.
in a credit card company, so I actually do understand how the company ends up making money. And it's not just you spending on the card, but also at a very high level, their entire portfolio of spend bringing them a certain contractual benefit that would
Hmm.
that they're okay with you being that churner that you are. They either would give you the card if you're a churner, if it falls in the profitable spectrum for them, or they would reject you if it does not. The
Hmm.
trust me or trust in the company to make the most capitalistic and financially beneficial decisions for themselves, because that's what they're in the market to do.
Yeah, I like really both aspects of what you said. The first being probably the more actionable one, which is that nothing about your personal finance should ever be on the back burner. You should be on top of your game, making sure you know exactly where every penny is going, for the most part, anywhere, as much as you
Yeah.
can without, like going crazy and ripping all your hair out. And also the aspect where, yeah, like people that run these credit card companies aren't dummies. Like they obviously account for situations like that. So I think that's a really helpful takeaway in that you just be proactive, really. Like, don't just blindly go off of what your friend said or what a flashy marketing campaign said. Read under the fine print, make sure or you're aware what you're getting into, and only then, take the plunge. So, yeah, appreciate you keeping it real there and obviously offering your insights. So, with that, I kind of want to jump to this really the whole spectrum of spending money, because we know at least in 2024, regardless of where you live, for the most part, if you want to exist, you're forced really to spend money. And that kind of brings me to, for the average person, yeah, so like say there's this person that likes to, go out every week for dinner or, drinks, and has a certain expenditure that's just kind of, it just adds up for them, really. It just, now we can treat that thing X to be really just X, but it's not planned and it's, let's just call it non-essential. So what are some smart ways that individuals can look to spend their money in a way that doesn't blow them off the rails away from their goals, and potentially, and I don't even know if this is possible, but still keeps them kind of aligned to what they had in mind for themselves. And I apologize in advance if this is too broad, but hopefully that question makes sense and you're able to offer some insight into that.
No, I actually no need of an apology there, because I think that keeping it broad actually makes a lot of sense. Because in my mind, the answer to this is the most broadest possible, which
Okay.
essentially means that it's so particular to an individual on what that journey for them would look like that it's not a one size fits all answer anyway. I think that spending money is important for me to be able to keep myself in the process of wanting to optimize and earn more money and build that wealth so that I can, at the end of the day, go ahead and achieve the dreams that I have. Those are a little bigger than what my paycheck can help me suffice, which is why I'm trying to get to that goal of building that wealth. And I think the whole conversation sort of revolved around optimizing money so much that
Mhm.
in a non-spoken way we've villainized spending money, and I love that you've segued into that because I think spending money because I think I love spending money and I think it's important just for
Right.
the
Who
reasons that I
doesn't?
told.
If
Yeah,
we're keeping it real, yeah, I don't know a
yeah,
single person that is like, no, I will
yeah,
not buy that new thing that I totally don't need.
yeah. Yeah, but and I think I was really bad with spending money, and when I say bad, I meant that I spent money in the worst possible manner a decade ago, or maybe even 5 years ago. But I think what I've found myself to have gotten better with is being mature of the feelings that spending money provides me, and I think that's helped me categorize the areas that I want to spend money in really well, which is that, hey, I absolutely love doing this thing and this is what I'm out there grinding myself for and earning all of this money for. So I'm not going to think too twice about the way I spend here. I'm going to be disciplined in telling myself that this is the way in which I need to spend and this is where I need to spend, and being true to the principles that I earlier spoke about, but I'm not going to stop myself from spending here. What that also means for me is that there's a bunch of other categories that I don't think fall at the same level of excitement for me, and I become super conscious in spending money there then take all that energy that I've saved myself of, devising strategies, spend here and apply here, so that even if I do have to spend in those categories, I'm optimizing through my knowledge of personal finance. I'm optimizing for inflow versus outflow. I'm optimizing to find the right places or the right time to spend on based off of what I've been able to build in terms of a liquid corpus. And I think what I'm trying to say is find I think I want to keep telling myself that I want to find the places that I enjoy spending money on and be super smart about what I don't think are the right places to spend money on, and then go ahead and um, you know find that system of spending it. I think um, taking all of this foundation back to the example of eating out, right? There are various ways in which you can achieve the optimization of spending money on eating out, but make sure that that's the place that you absolutely love to spend on.
Hmm.
I think that would be my takeaway from it.
That's I yeah, for multiple reasons, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I really love how broadly generalizable that is because it really can be anything. All you're saying is that make sure that like each person should kind of have their stack rank in order of things that they like, and anything that's not in the upper echelons should be thoroughly investigated, like is that really something I want to do? And I think that from that point it just really falls down to discipline, really. Like
Right.
despite asking that question, if you still end up doing that, perhaps there's bigger fish to fry than realizing what or what not deserves your money in terms of spending. um,
Yeah.
those were really all the questions I had earmarked for you. But while talking to some of our listeners, there came a couple other questions that I think are worth, getting your thoughts on. The first
Yeah.
being, for Indian students that move to the US, mostly around for their masters, what's a good way to look at optimizing or healthily increasing? I'm pretty sure healthily is not a word, but increasing their credit score in a sustainable and helpful manner. Um, Yeah, I guess once we get through that, I can ask the second one if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I think I can speak to my journey a little bit, and like almost
Yeah.
everything in the sphere of personal finance, I've captured these learnings from really smart and experienced people. What I
Mm.
had in terms of help is that I started speaking to people who were already at Purdue and who were my friends and told me what their pitfalls looked like or what their successes looked like within this journey. What they told me was that building a credit score is really important to be able to achieve a lot of things that you would want to in the US in the most optimized manner. If you don't have a credit score, you can still get a loan, but essentially what will happen is you will get it at a higher interest rate and you will end up paying more money for not having a credit score. And I would not like to do something like that just because, in my head, that's not the most optimized way to spend your money. Essentially, what I did was I found out what ways are available or accessible to me through which I can get a social security number, and that's essentially what you need to get a credit card for
Mhm.
most of the sort of credit cards or credit building activities that you would want to achieve. So I looked up online, found a job at a place that would apply for my credit card or apply for my SSN, social security number, and then help me build a credit history. Soon as I got my SSN, I made sure that I found the right student credit card, which is essentially a couple of providers or
Mhm.
few providers give students with no credit history a certain credit line with a certain credit amount, and that's limited, but that still is beneficial for you in many ways that I can think about. One of them being that you get limited amount to spend on it, which is great, keeps you disciplined, and two,
Absolutely.
yeah, gives you a chance to build that credit score. And I went ahead and started learning a little bit more about credit score, which is that, hey, what elements of my activity on the credit card help me achieve the most optimum credit score. And I had my own share of pitfalls there. I ended up spending, I think it was a one time scenario where I was quite close to my credit limit, which is a high utilization, and credit companies don't like it because high utilization means tougher stuff to manage for the debt payer. And I was quite capable of paying off that debt because I had all of that debit amount ready with me to pay that off. I just let my statement process and register all of that high utilization as my outstanding debt. And essentially I ensured that from that point onwards I kept paying what I kept spending on my credit card, and that helped me keep the utilization low.
Interesting.
I passed on this knowledge to a lot of people, I'm sure, including
Mm.
you at Purdue, but also to my sister, to a lot of people that I didn't think about that, later benefited from it. And that's essentially what I would also recommend everybody is to be on your toes with these snippets of information, little crumbs that you can keep getting from people who who have the experience. But I think if you specifically speak about students coming from India to the US, I think majority of us are super scrappy, and I'm sure there are so many resources that we end up accessing to be able to get to this position. So just accessing your community for learnings like these would help.
Um, yeah, the only thing I would add to that, I think, is that, and maybe this is just me, who is probably a bigger dummy than most people, but I actually waited way too long to get my first credit card. So I actually straight up did not have, a credit score at all,
Yeah,
because I did have my SSN because I was working a student job. But
yeah,
it never occurred to me, and I guess nobody told me. Another way to put that is I never asked anybody
right.
about if that's something that's smart that I should be doing. And yeah, by the time I did it, it was late. But thankfully, at least for me, it didn't really affect me that much. But it is something to keep in mind. I think that yeah, the earlier you start, the longer your credit history, the better
Right,
your score.
exactly.
So the second question was, and this is intentionally a yes no question. So for somebody that's just, that has accumulated, let's say, a few thousand dollars of savings, um, is it a good idea, yes or no, really, to stick, let's say, $500 every month blindly into an S&P 500? Yes or no?
Oh my goodness, the consultant in me or the strategist in me is finding it so hard to answer it in a one or a zero. My goodness. S&P 500s historically
Hmm?
have been great. So I would call it a yes. But I would love for a chance to elaborate if that's okay.
I would absolutely. Yeah. What's the
Yeah,
caveat there? Because I think that
yeah.
would be a really important caveat.
Yeah, yes, I think it's important just because at the end of the day, if you're in this investment game, what you want to do is get the maximum returns for yourself. How do you achieve that? Is by being smart with your investments. It could either mean that you're investing in an S&P 500 and letting the market do the work for you, or you putting in that effort or putting in the work that's required and knowing that you are able to achieve better returns and then finding the opportunity to take that $500 and invest somewhere. So if you read the books or if you go through that grind to understand what investing looks like and decide for yourself that, hey, this is not my cup of tea and I don't virtually have the time to invest in this, I'm earning a lot more through my time being utilized somewhere else, let's find S&P 500 and invest in that. And that's the biggest no brainer that I've heard from the most successful people in this landscape. If you are able to, through your performance and your confidence and your historical returns, achieve think that you can beat the market or beat S&P 500, I think the $500 are better investment.
Okay.
Essentially,
So yeah, that's really all of the stuff that I wanted to cover. I want to thank you so much for being here and talking us through this rather messy. Don't get me wrong. I was definitely worried about just how much value we would be able to get out of this. But just having sat stood here and hear you talk about this, I can already tell the immense value that I have already received and that our listeners are also going to from this conversation. So, really, really appreciate you taking the time today.
yeah, I loved that. I loved engaging with you. I absolutely loved hearing your perspective, what I was trying to share as well. And I hope that your viewers are able to capture all of that as well in the right manner. And thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. See you next
Yeah.
time.
See ya. Have a good one.
That brings us to the end of episode 5 of the Ready Set Do podcast. I hope that you were able to glean as much knowledge and insight from this episode as I was, being a personal finance noob myself. If you benefited from this conversation and would like to support me, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing to my channel on YouTube and leaving me up to a 5-star rating on Spotify. I have a lot of really interesting guests planned up from all walks of life that will show us how we can achieve whatever we want if we're only willing to ready, set,